All right, welcome everyone. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I'll just go ahead and share the whole screen, and then I am going to try to view this in full screen. All right, so that's how you go into full screen if you're on a Mac, which I'm on a Mac today. As I was just mentioning to Chris, our software runs on multiple platforms, and that includes both the cloud-based version and the desktop version, which is going to be relevant today because our Open-PHA product does work on both the desktop and in the cloud. So let me start by going out into the cloud and looking at the cloud-based premium version. So I'm going to go to KISS. So immediately, I don't know if you can see my menu bar, but I went to kiss.kenexis.com, and that's going to bring you into the login suite. Now, this actually is quite important, and it's an immediate distinction between our software and a lot of our competitors, is that we have written elegant enterprise software that has all of the elegant enterprise functionality that you expect from all of the major sophisticated software vendors, and that begins with single sign-on. So you can always log in, or not always, you can log in with a username and a password. So, I could type in a username and a password here, or I could do single sign-on. So Kenexis is a Microsoft Office 365 shop. I'm logged in Office 365. So when I click here, it's automatically going to bring me into the software suite. So now I'm in the software suite, and you'll see you're not in a HAZOP software, you're on a platform, and that platform has multiple different applications. In fact, it has an expanding number of applications. What I'm going to do to begin with is I'm going to make the screen a little bit bigger so it's a little bit easier for you to see things as you log in. So right here, this is what we refer to as the project manager portion of the software, or the finder, or the file manager. So in this section, on the left-hand side, you're going to have a list of facilities. On the right-hand side, you're going to have a list of studies. I'm going to go to General Oil and Gas Operating Company, which is a fictitious company that we created to do software demonstrations and training classes. So if you've ever taken any of our training classes, you've probably seen the General Oil and Gas Operating Company, Texas City gas plant. Okay, so right out of the gate, you'll see that you can organize your organization any way that you want. So you can create folders to set yourself up by region, or you could go by individual facilities, or you could go by process operation types. There's the only limit is your imagination in the way that you want to set up your file structure. I'm going to drill down into the Texas City gas plant, which has multiple areas. I'm going to go into the separations area, and then I'm going to look at the studies that are associated with the separations area. And you'll see that there are a number of what we refer to as Open-PHA studies. That is the software that we're talking about today. That's our HAZOP LOPA study software. But you'll also see I've got a Vertigo study that contains my SIS design basis for SIL verification. I've got effigy studies, which are fire and gas mapping, laying out fire detectors and gas detectors. I've got Arbor fault tree analysis software when I need to do more sophisticated modeling than some of our other tools allow. I have Bowtie diagrams that allow me to do similar work to a LOPA, but in a more sophisticated graphical format where you can handle multiple consequences in one study. So you'll see that there are a lot of options in the Kenexis Integrated Safety Suite, making it more of a complete tool for doing everything related to functional safety. Okay, so I'm going to drill down. Before I drill down into the study, though, let me show you a little bit more about how things are licensed and the enterprise functionality. Now, you as an individual user can get an individual account where you just use your username and password to access things. But a lot of the larger organizations are leveraging the power that we provide in the enterprise space. So in the enterprise space, if you are a company administrator, over here in the top right, you'll see this icon for company administrator. This is going to allow you to view a bunch of settings that will help you to organize and set parameters for your organization as a whole. So if you're an organizational administrator, you can rename your company. You could decide what the administrators are going to see, whether they're going to see everything or only their own work. And you have a lot of parameters for security. So when you create a facility, is that facility going to be viewable to everyone in your organization? Are you allowed to share your studies with people outside your organization? So for instance, if you're an operating company and you want your data structure to be available to your vendors, like an engineering, procurement, and construction EPC company, to be able to do work directly on your files, you can do that. You could decide whether or not you want to allow data export. So data can be exported from KISS. It can be imported back into KISS if you allow that through your security settings. And then in terms of single sign-on, you can decide whether or not you want to use it with this checkbox. And the next checkbox is whether or not you want to force it. So single sign-on is as easy as figuring out or having your IT department figure out what your tenant ID is, and then putting that information into this cell and then turning single sign-on on, which will allow it. But if you check this box, it will force you to use the single sign-on process and not allow you to just use a username and password. That's going to be important to a lot of IT administrators in larger companies, because they know that if they suspend a person's Office 365 account because they were terminated or they quit or left the company for whatever other reason, if they disable Office 365, they're also going to disable their ability to get into KISS and any other software platform that uses single sign-on. In here, the administrators are also going to be able to look at their list of users and add new users. They'll be able to group users together. So if you want to assign access privileges to an entire group, so the entire technical staff or all of the PSM management, you can group people together, and then when you do authorizations, you'll do the entire group at one time instead of having to spend time doing that for each individual person. Next up, you'll see the licenses that you have available. So we at Kenexis have lots of licenses to all of our software because, well, we do. And not only will it tell you what applications you have licenses to, it will tell you how many licenses you have and how many are in use. And finally, what is the expiration date for those licenses? Now, why this is important is this gives me the opportunity to talk to you about how we do licensing. So at Kenexis, in the Kenexis Integrated Safety Suite, our licensing process is the most cost-effective way to do licensing out there, far better than all of our competitors. You don't need to have a license, an $8,000, $9,000 license for every machine that's going to use the software. A lot of our competitors to do that, that's ridiculously cost prohibitive. You don't even need a license for every named user who has an account. Anyone, there's no limit to users of the software you can put into your account. The limitation is how many people are using your software simultaneously. So let's say I only had 2 licenses to Vertigo, which is our SIS design basis software. And right now, there are 2 people using the software. In fact, AK, Arthur, is using Vertigo, and Muhammad is using Vertigo right now. So if another user wanted to use the software and we only had 2 licenses, when they tried to access the software, they would get an error message saying that all of your licenses are consumed. These are the people that are using the licenses, and you're going to have to wait until one of them is done or contact them to free up the license. So that kind of the number of seats that are available, and those seats can be shared across any geographic region, any company region, is absolutely the most effective and cost-effective way to do licensing. And when you're a company administrator, you even have the ability to boot people off the software. So let's say AK went to lunch, but he was still logged in. I could click this button and boot him out if I couldn't wait the 30 minutes that the garbage collection routine would take to just bump him out anyway because he's inactive in the license. Okay, so that's how the licensing works. And then also here is where you would set up your API integrations. I'm going to talk about API integrations a little bit later, but we have a full suite of API integrations that are going to allow us to communicate data from KISS to external users. So some of the use cases for that would be things like exporting the recommendations from Open-PHA studies into a external recommendation tracking software. So 2-way communications with any other API enabled third-party application is something that we are capable of doing in the Kenexis Integrated Safety Suite. Now, also, before I delve into the study itself, let me talk a little bit now about kind of, again, those higher level things. And you'll see here that I've selected the General Oil and Gas Operating Company facility. If I click here and go into the options menu, you'll see that there are facility details. So you can rename the facility here. It tells you who the owner is. I am the owner of the facility. I have the ability to delete the facility and all the information in it if I wanted to, or I can reassign ownership. Now, right now, I should tell you that if you delete something, it's not really deleted yet. We'll basically flag the database entries to say that this database entry has been deleted, but the garbage collection routine won't actually throw it away until about 6 months from now. And if you accidentally delete something and you want Kenexis to bring it back to life, we can do that. Just let us know and we will go through the process of making that happen. So here I can right now, I've made this a private facility, which means even for users in my organization, if I did not invite you to view or edit the facility, you can't. Then down here, you'll see all the permissions for doing that type of thing. So when someone has edit authorization, can they create folders, rename folders, move folders, delete folders? So change the directory structure. And what can they do with studies? So a lot of information for security purposes sits not just at the overall corporate level, but at the facility level. And then there's also information that is at the folder level, specifically who is authorized. So you'll see here that AK is an authorized editor of everything in General Oil and Gas Operating Company. And Sean Cunningham is actually an administrator, so he'll be allowed to change the administration settings. And those types of authorizations cascade down. So if you have access at the top level, you will have access at every level underneath, and we can even assign permissions at different levels. So for the separations area, you can grant access to only different, specific areas in your organizational structure. Okay, so that's kind of the big overview of the enterprise features, enterprise functionality, security, and data settings. Let's now go and delve into the software itself. So I'm going to open up our Texas City gas plant HAZOP, and I'm going to open the working revision. I will explain what the difference between an approved revision and a working revision is later, because Open-PHA has sophisticated revision tracking capabilities that are simply not available in competitors to our software. Okay, so once you get into the Open-PHA study itself, a lot of this stuff should look very familiar to you. It should look very common to you, because at the end of the day, PHA software is not magic. A lot of people are trying to do exactly the same thing or similar things when they're working on PHA software. So I'm going to start in the study data tab, and you'll see there's a tab strip along the top that allows you to view a bunch of different tabs. And in study data, it also has a tab strip along the left-hand side that's going to allow you to see different attributes of study data. So you'll see a top tab strip and a side tab strip throughout most of the application. Okay, right now we're in the overview. It's just overview information of the facility. Next up, for this particular study, we'll talk about what team members were involved in performing the study and their information. Then we're going to have sessions that tell you what sessions were performed for this PHA study. And then you have a matrix that will tell you for each section of, or each study session. So for instance, Joe Kofalt, those of you who are watching this from Ohio State probably know Joe Kofalt, was partially present on the August 29th HAZOP study session. Documents gives a list of all of the documents that are available for the study that were used as part of the study, and that's usually going to include things like P&IDs and so on. And furthermore, not only do you have the drawings, if you put a hyperlink into the link field, you'll have the ability to click on this button and actually bring that up from your document management system. So at Kenexis, we made the decision that we didn't want to be the storage repository for your process safety information, although we may change that position in the future if that's what you want. But right now, you'll see that I've got process safety information stored on my personal OneDrive account. And if I click this button, I can go ahead and retrieve that information. So a lot of linkages to third-party applications and also other applications inside the KISS framework to facilitate the work process. There's a revalidation history, and then there's a revision history. I'm going to come back to the revision history later because it is an important and really popular, powerful feature of our software that most of our competitors just cannot compete with. You'll see I have 6 different fixed revisions of this PHA study. So we've got an evergreen document, but we also have the entire history of every revision that was ever made to this document stored here in the rev history. The next item down is the column settings, which I'm going to get to in just a few minutes when I start talking about the worksheets. And I'm going to talk about one of the most powerful features of our software that's completely different from our competitors, from most of our competitors, in that we allow you to customize the view of the software so you can make it match your workflow from a view perspective, but we never tamper with the underlying data structure, whereas a lot of our competitors allow you to tamper with the data structure, which might seem like it's a good feature, and sometimes it is. But if one person in your organization changes the data structure for their studies at an enterprise level, everything got messed up, because now you can no longer grab data from that study. You can't roll it up into dashboards because this file and that file don't match each other, and that becomes a big problem. So more on that coming up, how you do the customization without tampering with the data structure. And then we also have a study settings page that's going to allow you, again, further customization on how you interact with the software and what you're able to see. So right now I've got autosave set up for once a minute. I could turn it off, I could turn it on, I could change the time duration. I could go into presenter mode. So sometimes it's a little bit difficult for people to view the PHA worksheet when you're showing it up on a screen or you're projecting it. And if you go into presenter mode, it kind of bolds things and makes things bigger so that they're a little bit easier to see. You can show or hide the top tabs. So if I'm not using the parking lot, I can uncheck it and you'll see that it went away even in the background. So MOCs and incidents, if I don't want to see the tab, I can uncheck it and it's going to go away. So that's the ability, again, to change the views. And you even have the ability to turn the numbering on and off in the different areas, different regions, different organizations. Sometimes they want to see numbering, sometimes they don't want to see numbering. And if you want to do some kind of customized numbering, you can shut it off and just put your novel different numbering system in as plain text when you're entering information in. Okay, so that is the study data tab. It's going to kind of allow you to view the general information about the study, handle your revisions, handle your settings. All that work happens here. After that, now we're going into the traditional PHA workflow. And that generally is going to start with nodes. So you're going to define the nodes that are contained in your study, with the full list of parameters that might be associated with that node. And you can associate a node with multiple different drawings that are shown in your drawing database. You can either enter drawings from the database in here, or you can type new drawings in and they will show up in the database. Under the hood, everything that's happening in an Open-PHA study works in the same way as a relational database, but it's not a relational database. It's something called a JSON object or JavaScript object notation, which is a extremely powerful data structure technique that's used in the internet. It was built in the internet, and it's why Kenexis's Open-PHA works so much faster than any of our web-based components because we're leveraging the most modern technology of the internet, whereas a lot of our competitors are going to have ridiculously slow software because they're using third-party controls to access SQL Server databases, which is just, it results in comically bad, comically slow performance. A little bit more on JSON objects coming up in a few minutes. Okay, so we have our worksheet where we're going to define all of our nodes. Then we're going to go ahead and on a node by node basis, we're going to define the guide words that are used in those nodes. So you have the ability to have a lot of flexibility in what you do, because those deviations are things that you can change from node to node. So you'll see here in this node, we have a standard set of deviations that you would expect from a oil and gas type operation where a chemical reaction is not happening. But if you want to do more of a traditional SIS study, your node can be the safety instrumented functions that you're doing a layer of protection analysis for. Or if you're doing a what if study, your deviation can simply be the what if question. And all these things are editable on a node by node basis. And if you wanted to add a new node, so let me go back here, I'm going to add a new node. Actually, I'm not going to do it that way. Now I'm going to go ahead and delete that node. If I wanted to add a new node that has like a standard set of guide words that my organization might want to use, I could go here in the premium tools I can import from library, and a lot more information is going to be coming up on the library aspects. That's another super powerful feature of our software that's not easily accessible or not as capable in most of our competitor software. So if I click import node, I can either go to my custom library, I can go to a Kenexis standard library, and I can import a set of standard deviations or whatever things I have set up. So I could go and I could say, okay, import standard deviations. I can import the node. It's going to complain to me that the risk tolerance criteria from the template don't match the risk tolerance criteria in my study, which is fine. I'm only importing the actual node descriptions. And when I do that, it imports all of that information from the node, brings it into my study, and I have all those things available to me. All right, so once I've defined my nodes, I've defined my deviations for my nodes, or I've imported a set of deviations from my standards. Now I can go into my PHA worksheets and I can do my work, the work that you would normally do when you're doing a HAZOP. So when you look at this HAZOP worksheet, one of the things that immediately might come to you that you might be thinking about is, oh, this doesn't look like the PHA worksheet that my company uses. It's very likely that it won't when you just create a standard study. So how do I rectify that? Well, as I mentioned, Open-PHA is extremely flexible. We always work with our operating companies that we're bringing on board through our white glove onboarding process to make sure that everything's customized to match the way that they do things. But we don't do that by manipulating the data structure or changing how the software works. That fixes a small problem on the ground level, but creates a larger problem for the enterprise as a whole, because now the activities that happen after you facilitate the study have been crippled by the fact that you change the data structure. So it's, if I have software written to grab data out of the study, it doesn't have the same structure anymore. So that software got broken. Tools like Power BI that count on a constant data structure don't have it anymore. So in a Kenexis study, we have a uniform JSON object schema, or a JSON schema that defines what our data structure looks like. And that JSON schema never changes. You can count on it. Well, it changes from version to version of the software, but it's always backward and forward compatible. So your data will never get broken. The next time you log into the software, it will always come up to the most recent version of the software. And I should mention, in terms of most recent version of the software, we are working so feverishly to meet our customers' needs that this software usually gets updated at least once a week. You don't have to wait 2 years for the next version of the software to come out. Okay. Excuse me. So now what we're going to do is we're going to look at the customization. So for the customization of the software, we're going to go back over to study data. So let's do one case. Right now, this is a traditional, I've got a deviation, I look at a consequence. I'm going to look at multiple causes for that consequence. Each cause is going to have multiple safeguards. And then I do a risk ranking. So this risk ranking that you're looking at here is a very common, what is the risk ranking after I consider all of the safeguards, but before I consider the beneficial effect of the recommendations that I'm going to make to improve safety? Well, what if my organization wants to do a risk ranking before the safeguards and after the safeguards, because we're going to use both of those risk rankings for different purposes? Well, we can do that. And we're not going to change the data structure. We're simply going to change what you see. So if I go here to study data, I can go and I can look at the entire data structure. So this is kind of the relational tree-based data structure that is contained in our JSON object. So if you look at a node, each node has many deviations. Every deviation has many consequences, and the consequences have many causes, and so on. So what we're looking at is in the consequence data table, you'll see that we have the ability to do risk ranking. So I've got a safety severity right here. And that's all that I'm looking at the moment. And that safety severity is the severity after safeguards. So if I wanted to do things before safeguards, I can say, show me the risk ranking before safeguards, show me the safety severity before safeguards, and show me this LBS thing. I'll come back to what that LBS is. So when I check those, now when I go to my PHA worksheets, you'll see that those fields are now visible. I didn't add them. I didn't remove them. They were always there. It's just a matter of what are you seeing and what you're not seeing. So we can have one comprehensive superset of fields in our database that are going to allow us to work not only internally from study to study, but also to work elegantly with third-party contractors who need to access data from our databases. Excuse me. Okay, so this shows me the safety ranking before safeguards. This shows me the risk reduction before safeguards. And here I have LBS. What is LBS? Well, that's the likelihood before safeguards. Well, heck, how was I supposed to know that? Well, if you don't like the labels at the top of your columns, you could change those too. So I go back where I was and I see LBS is the field that I was looking at. If I click here, I can change this back to what it was originally before my last demo, which is likelihood before safeguards. And when I hit apply, now I go back to my LOPA worksheets and it is likelihood before safeguards. So everything that you're seeing should be very familiar to you. We have a whole bunch of tools for working with the data structure to set this table up any way that you want. Okay, so now a couple of other things that I should bring up now is that what you're seeing here is what we call a consequence indexed study. What that means is that every consequence is going to have multiple different causes associated with that. This is the most common way that people will do PHAs when their intention is to go directly from a HAZOP into a layer of protection analysis, because in an layer of protection analysis, you're generally concerned with the fact that you have multiple different causes that can generate a consequence that you're trying to protect against, specifically if you're trying to pick SIL targets for safety instrumented systems. So if you wanted to go to a more traditional structure, you have the capability of doing that. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to look at a cause indexed study. And this is not fleshed out as much. It's just to show you the difference in the data structures. So here, if I go into my PHA worksheet, you'll see that for the deviation, the cause comes first, and you have multiple different consequences. So it's just another variation on the data structure that the software is capable of. Ultimately, there are 4 options for data structure, and let me go ahead and show you how those are created. So I'm going to go back out to the file manager area of the study, or of the platform, and I'm going to click on the insert button. So when you click on the insert button, this allows you to insert a new type of study. So I can create a new folder to create my data structure, or any of the study types that you have access to will be listed here. So if all you have is a license to Open-PHA, Open-PHA is the only thing that's going to show up. I have the ability to create fault tree studies in Arbor, fire and gas mapping studies in Effigy, audits in Open Audit, obviously Open-PHA. OpScope is our procedure management and tracking tool. Quantum is our quantitative consequence analysis tool, which right now I am mentally planning to have released before the end of the year to everyone. That's not going to be available to you. I only have the beta version, or it's not even a beta, it's an alpha on my software right now. SRS, which, yeah, I don't even want to talk about that, and Vertigo, which is our SIS Safety Lifecycle tool, which I'm going to talk a little bit about because I need to show you how Open-PHA is integrated into that tool. So when I create a new Open-PHA study, it's going to ask a lot of questions. It's going to begin with, do you want to start from a template? So most of your organizations, most enterprise users have a template that they want everyone to start from that has their definition of cause indexed versus consequence indexed. It has the rows that are viewable versus not viewable defined. It's going to have your risk tolerance criteria all set up. So most of the time, if you're in a large organization, you're just going to start from a library template that is key to your organization. I'm going to create an empty study. Let's say I've never used it before. Now it's going to ask me how I want it structured. So I can do a cause indexed study where one cause has multiple consequences, or I can do a consequence index study where one consequence has multiple causes. I'm going to go ahead and just create a cause indexed. It's still the more common way to do HAZOPs, not LOPAs, but HAZOPs. And then it's going to ask you what style of LOPA you want to do. I'm going to get into the options available for LOPA. The most common way to do LOPA now is going to be option A, which is where you're going to use TMEL targets, numerical frequency targets, to define tolerable risk. And you're actually going to input frequencies of initiating event failures and probabilities of failure of your IPLs or your safeguards. But there is another option. Some companies use option B, which is the implicit LOPA. And for the implicit LOPA, instead of running all these specific, precise calculations, you're going to put your risk tolerance criteria into matrices. So for this consequence category and this likelihood category, how many orders of magnitude of risk reduction are required? And your safeguards are going to be assigned LOPA credits, which are orders of magnitude. So those two types of doing the LOPA are available. I'm going to pick the most common one, which is going to be option A, the TMEL explicit style. Then even if you create a custom study, you'll still have the ability to go to your library and import the risk criteria for your facility, or you might have multiple different risk criteria. Let's say you're a consulting company or an EPC firm, you might have a different set of risk tolerance criteria for all the customers that you work with, and you'll be able to bring them in separately. So I'm just going to use the default. Then you give it a name. In this case, I'm going to call it temporary delete, to remind me that it's temporary and I need to delete it. So that's how you create a new study, and you'll see everything in here. It's all blank. It's a blank starting point that you're going to want to go through. So I'm going to go ahead and delete that because I don't want it anymore. But now remember, I deleted that study, but I didn't delete that study. I flagged it as it needs to be deleted. And 6 months from now, if I don't bring it back to life, the garbage collection routine is actually going to delete it. All right, while I am here, let me show you another critical, important functionality of the software before I get back into the details. So what you saw was the HAZOP worksheet. So here is the HAZOP worksheet. for the facility. Kind of remember what we're looking at here. Okay, so right now I'm in the cloud. I'm doing all of this in my web browser. I'm using Safari from Macintosh, Mac OS, but it'll work on any, Windows, Mac, Linux. It will work on Safari. It will work on Edge, Chrome, whatever browser. We really strive to make sure that it will work in any platform that you're looking at. But what if I can't get to the cloud? What if I'm doing a study in the back 40 of the plant and there's no Wi-Fi and there's no internet access? Or what if I want to tighten up some of the study descriptions and I'm sitting on an airplane? What do? Well, normal cloud-based software, you'd be kind of out of luck. But within the Kenexis Integrated Safety Suite, we give you the ability to work offline using our free desktop version of Open-PHA. So if I'm in the cloud, I can click on the export button. And as long as the security settings allow me to export, because you can turn that off, when I click this button, you'll see that the file or the JSON object just got downloaded to my desktop. So I can click here to the downloads folder and I can open up this study. So what just happened? And unfortunately, I haven't updated my Open-PHA software very recently. But what happens is you have the ability to run the software both online and offline. And if I had the most recent version of the study, which right now my computer is going to go through an algorithm to know that it's going to contact the server, it's going to realize I'm not running the most recent version of the software, and it's going to go download the most recent version of the software. But you have the ability in our platform, bear with me, let me bring Safari back up, to be able to download, work on the desktop version, and then re-upload by hitting the import button and some other functionality that we have available to get stuff in the cloud and out of the cloud. The desktop version of the software is free. So I'm going to do something really quick. I'm going to clear that. I'm going to add a new browser tab. And I'm going to go to our commercial site, which is www.kenexis.com, to show you where all this resides. So if you go to the commercial site of our software and go to software and go to PHA HAZOP and LOPA software, that's going to take you to the Open-PHA page. The Open-PHA page has a lot of additional information, the most important of which is down here where it says download, trial, and pricing information. So when I click that link, it's going to take me to the bottom of the page where it allows me to get the software. So I can click on the download button and download the desktop version of the software for free. The software that you download for free that runs on your desktop does everything that you would need to do during a facilitation study. You can add nodes, you can manipulate the HAZOP worksheet, you can manipulate the LOPA worksheet, you can manipulate the safeguards, recommendations, everything that you're used to doing in all of our competitors' desktop software, you can absolutely do in our free version. The only thing that you can't do is the premium features, and I'll talk about the premium features in just a couple minutes here. Okay. Here, you'll also be able to do a request for Open-PHA Cloud if you're using our desktop software and want to see how some of those premium features work. If you click here, you fill out a form. It's going to allow you to have access to the cloud-based version. And here, you can request a proposal, and it actually gives our pricing. So our pricing, we put it right here on our website because we're so proud of it. If you're a large enterprise, our software is going to cost you probably an order of magnitude less than what our competitors are charging. Not 10% less, not 50% less, an order of magnitude less. So I mentioned that we charge by the concurrent user license, and it's $22.50 a year. So for a large organization, so let's say you're running a large oil refinery, you're probably only going to need one license, and everyone's going to be able to share that one license because most of the time you're not working in the cloud anyway. You're working on your desktop version. And when you're working on your desktop version, that's not going to consume a license. So this is where you can download the free version. This is where our pricing is. This is where you can contact Kenexis to get a proposal for the software. Okay, let's keep drilling down into the functionality. So I showed you the HAZOP worksheet. Yes.
We got a question here.
Okay, let's hear it.
In the chat. In our practices, the likelihood is elevated after the safeguards, SIF excluded, but in Open-PHA, both severity and likelihood are elevated before safeguards. How do we elevate if we need to go into LOPA in this case?
Okay, excellent question. So right now, there are a couple of different options for how you want to run your studies. Right now in this PHA, you'll see that we have risk rankings before safeguards and risk rankings after safeguards. That process is complete. I don't want to say it's completely manual, but it's matrix based. You're allowed to pick what your consequence severity is. You're allowed to pick what your likelihood is, and it's then going to use this matrix to say, well, I picked a 4, 3, so the risk ranking is going to be a high risk number 4. That's what comes off the matrix. So it does all of that kind of, off the matrix, and this risk ranking before and this risk ranking after are different. So now, if you're in the paradigm, which most companies currently are in the paradigm of we do our HAZOP first, then we're going to do our LOPA later, you have the ability to determine yes or no whether I'm going to do a LOPA, and you can simply run your checkbox. No, I'm not going to do my LOPA. Yes, I am going to do a LOPA. And you do that by looking at what is the severity, what is the risk ranking? Now, every organization does this differently. Some people will look only at severity. Some people will only look at risk ranking. Some people will look at a combination of severity and risk ranking. At the end of the day, you need to set the flag as to whether I'm going to take this scenario into LOPA manually by checking yes or no. Okay, that's in the HAZOP worksheet. We have a little bit more sophistication in our LOPA worksheet because there are some operating companies that do basically their PHA, their HAZOP is an implicit LOPA. So they will be doing a lot of, setting IPLs, giving credit for IPLs in their HAZOP. But when you're doing that, you're actually doing an implicit LOPA and calling it a HAZOP. So in our software, you would need to do that in the LOPA worksheet. So for right now, and I'm going to, when I get to the LOPA worksheet, I'm going to need to start at the beginning, which is a little bit more involved than directly answering your question. But when I get into the LOPA worksheet, I'll show you some of the automation that's going to credit your safeguards before a risk ranking and after risk ranking automatically using the implicit LOPA approach to get those targets. So sit tight with me. We have organizations that are doing exactly what you're doing. It will just take a second for me to explain the LOPA worksheet and then get into that. Okay, so yeah, so kind of going on to that. So again, if you have more questions on the HAZOP worksheet and customization, please feel free to use the software and send questions to me directly, edward.marzell@kenexis.com. If you need the spelling, just go to our website. My email address and my ugly mug are all over the website. Or if you send an email to support@kenexis.com, that'll go to our entire support team, and whoever picks up the ticket first will answer your question. Okay, so that's the PHA worksheet, which is going to be used for HAZOPs. It's going to be used for what-if studies. Then we have a LOPA worksheet. Now, some people do their HAZOP directly in the LOPA worksheet and hide the HAZOP worksheet. Some people go from transition from one to another. So you'll see that I said LOPA is required for this scenario, which is 1.1. When I go to my LOPA worksheet, 1.1 shows up, and I can go and I could do my layer of protection analysis, which is extremely complex based on the demo that I gave to someone just yesterday afternoon. But you'll see that the numbers skip. So I go 1.1, 1.2, and then I go to 1.6. Well, how did that happen? Well, I'm only going to show the LOPA worksheet where the transition to LOPA was required. So for deviation 1.5, I don't have the need to do a LOPA checked. So if I don't have that checked, it's not going to show up on the LOPA worksheets. Okay, now let's dig into the LOPA worksheets. So LOPA is kind of one of those things that I have a very long history in. It's something that I love. It's something that I helped build from the ground up. Starting in 1993 is when I first started doing the thought processes that ultimately ended up in LOPA. So, you know, my favorite joke that I like to tell is that when I invented LOPA, I called it simplified fault tree analysis. And those guys from Roman Haas, Dennis Hendershot, and Art Dowell, they had a catchier name. Layer of protection analysis is much catchier than simplified fault tree analysis. So you're using their name, but you're generally still using my math because they were all one cause, one consequence. When right out of the gate, I was like, no. We need to concatenate the risk of all of the causes that generate the consequence that a safety instrument and function is intended to protect against. But in reality, there were a whole bunch of us, Dennis and Art, myself, a couple, several other people were all kind of working on this simultaneously, passing notes back and forth on what we were doing. And, I will say that the Roman Haas guys got to the marketing people first with their name, but I digress. So in a layer of protection analysis, you're basically going into a little bit more detail, providing a little bit more precision, using a little bit more rigor in what you're doing than a traditional HAZOP. So if you look at the study, there's information that's going to get carried over from the PHA. So the deviation and the consequence, they're carried over directly from the PHA. It's not a one-time movement of information. Everything is tied in the data structure. So if I change the consequence here, so change here, when I go back to the PHA worksheet, that change happens. And when I change it in the PHA worksheet, it's going to get carried back over to the LOPA worksheet. So it's not that we have a different data structure that we're playing with. There's one common underlying data structure. We're just showing you different views of it, different fields are available. Okay, so in a LOPA, and you're looking at the TMEL style LOPA, target mitigated event likelihood, target maximum event likelihood, that is going to pick a target based on the consequence severity. So here I selected severity level 4, which is high, associated with a single fatality. That's going to have a TMEL of 1E-4 associated with it, or 1 in 10,000 chance per year if this event is what is tolerable. How did we know that? Well, we're going to go to our risk tolerance criteria. We're going to look at the consequence table, and this is where all of this is defined. So for every consequence, there's a code, there's a verbal description, and there is a TMEL, target maximum event likelihood. And you could do this, you're looking at safety, but you could do it for environment, you could do it for asset, community, and reputation. At this point in time, most people are only doing it once for a combination of safety and environmental, whereas like 10, 15 years ago, it was de rigueur. It was classy to do it 3 times, once for safety, once for environmental, and once for asset. It was particularly the asset that like caused very bizarre things to happen. A lot of SIS designs were dominated by financial reasons that resulted in really horrible designs. So we have come back for the most part to just using one, but the software is designed to allow you to do things any way that you would ever want to do. All right. I have a relatively complex LOPA worksheet built up here. So I have the deviation and the consequence severity all came from the PHA worksheet. The causes came from the PHA worksheet too. I can say causes came from PHA. And when I go back to my PHA, you'll see that the causes came from the PHA, but the amount of detail is different. So here we know that there are safeguards associated with the cause, but we're not fleshing them out in as much detail. So I'm going to go ahead and erase that text here in my PHA worksheet, bring it back to my LOPA worksheet, okay, where you can see that changed. Okay, so what's different is once we go into the causes, we are assigning more detail to them. So here in the LOPA worksheet, I can assign frequencies to causes. I can also assign enabling events, enabling event descriptions, and probabilities to those causes. So if this cause is only hazardous, if the temperature is below freezing, I can put that in as an enabling event that will modify the frequency of my cause. So some people want to show enabling events. I also then have conditional modifiers. So a conditional modifier is actually going to modify your consequence. So I will have a potential fatality event if the material ignites and if the area is occupied. And I could put those probabilities of conditions that allow the consequence to occur, I can list them out as conditional modifiers. But what if I didn't want to do that? Well, instead of putting everything here, the math works out the same if I just call them IPLs. So I can say enabling event here, and I can give it a PFD of 0.1, let's say, and I can add a conditional modifier. I can add that here and give it a frequency. And then what I can do is I could go back into my study settings and clean my sheet up a little bit. So if I go into my study settings, I can hide the row that contains my conditional modifiers. I can hide the row that contains my enabling events. And when I go back to my LOPA worksheet, everything is a little bit cleaner because I've hidden a lot of the, well, actually, I still have the enabling event probability, but where did I do this? Oh, there, I needed to do that. So now my LOPA worksheet's a little bit cleaner in that I'm only showing, I deleted, or I hid the view of my independent protection layers, which is why this is so clean. But my point here is that you have the ability, again, to change the way you work, not by changing the underlying data structure. The data is still there. I can bring it back to life. I can show it to you. Safeguards. Okay, there we go. There we go. Now they're back. So I'm just changing what things look like. Okay, so you'll see that the cause has a frequency, which on the PHA worksheet, it doesn't. You're going to have likelihood categories for the scenario as a whole. And on the LOPA worksheets, you're also going to have IPLs. And right now, I have a very elaborate list of things to view for the IPL, which is some people want to see this level of detail, other people don't. So let me clean things up a little bit and go into my safeguards list. And I don't want to see the is IPL row. I don't want to see response time. I don't want to see any of these checkboxes, and I don't want to see the comments. When I go back to my worksheet, lo and behold, things are a lot cleaner now. So how does the math work? It's really easy. And in this case, all you're doing is you're taking your frequency, you're multiplying that frequency by the PFD of all of your protection layers for that cause, and then you're going to get a mitigated event likelihood for that cause. And then if you have multiple causes, you simply sum up all the mitigated event likelihoods for all of the scenarios. Now, I have a whole bunch of stuff here that is making my LOPA ratio really wonky. So let me get rid of some stuff to make our math a little bit cleaner and a little bit more reasonable. So let me go ahead and delete some of these safeguards and show you a little bit more about the math. Going to delete. And I'm still at a risk reduction factor of 0. So okay, I've got too many relief valves here that I'm taking credit for, and I'm taking credit for too many safety instrumented functions. Okay. Now, looking at this, things are a little bit easier to understand. So I have a scenario where I need the risk to be 10e minus 4. I have a frequency of 0.1. And right now, I know that I have a PFD of 0.01 for my relief valve. And I don't have a target shown for my safety instrumented function. So it's going to calculate 0.1 times 0.01 gives me 10 to the minus 3. This is a very simple example. You can make it as complicated as you want. The software is then going to compare the 10 to the minus 3 against the target of 10 to the minus 4. And it's going to say, hey, this number is higher than the target. That's bad. So we made it red and bold to tell you you have a problem. This scenario is not achieving your tolerable risk. This LOPA ratio tells you what PFD of a safety instrumented function you need to achieve tolerable risk. The RRF number will show you the risk reduction factors that you need in order to achieve tolerable risk. So what I'm going to do is I have a 1 order of magnitude gap. So I'm going to assign a performance target of 0.1 SIL 1 to my safety instrumented function. When I do that, now my risk is tolerable. So this is a typical LOPA worksheet using the explicit style of LOPA, what most of you are familiar with. Again, we have all of the accuracy, all of the rigor. We have a lot of flexibility on how you're going to configure the tool. We can do the tool both qualitatively and quantitatively. So this is the explicit LOPA. Let me go ahead now, and I'm going to back out, and I'm going to show you the implicit version of the tool. So some of you, when you're doing a LOPA, you're not using explicit numbers. You're not calculating the math. So instead, let's look at a scenario where I have tank overfill with fire and fatality, and the severity of that, let's say, is high. Then you're going to say, well, I have causes. So level control failure is a cause. Operator miscalculates available volume is a cause. Now, instead of putting a frequency number on those events, you're going to give it a category. So high, for instance. What then happens is you'll determine how many orders of magnitude of risk reduction you need. So we have an intersection of high, high. So for this cause, you go to your risk tolerance criteria and you say the intersection of high and high is a risk rank 4. Risk rank 4 requires 2 LOPA credits, 2 orders of magnitude of risk reduction to be tolerable. So when I go back to my worksheet, I know that for high and high, I need 2 orders of magnitude or 2 orders of magnitude of risk reduction in order to make my risk tolerable. Well, if I say I've got a safety instrumented function, which gives me 1 IPL credit, and a high level alarm, which gives me 1 high level credit, I needed 2 orders of magnitude of risk reduction. I have 2 orders of magnitude of risk reduction, so my LOPA gap becomes 0. Tolerable risk is achieved. So that's just another format of doing the LOPA. And that implicit LOPA format, a lot of people use that as their HAZOP. So instead of doing a full HAZOP, they will just use that implicit style of LOPA to do their PHA study from beginning to end without going into the quantitative details. Okay, so with that, that's the LOPA worksheet. Very powerful, lots of options for doing it quantitatively, explicitly, or implicitly. You can break out enabling events and conditional modifiers separately or put everything together. Very, very powerful tool. The next item up is checklists. So a lot of times, instead of or in addition to your PHA, you're going to add checklists. So maybe you've got something like an inherently safer checklist, or human factors or global considerations are checklist items that you might have. So you can load all those checklists in. And once again, if you're using the premium tool, you could go and import those checklists from your library. So build the checklists of the library, you can import them in. So if I go to my inherently safer checklist, I can have the list of checklist questions, yes or no, did I achieve the objective, information about objectives, and then checklist recommendations. So nothing earth-shattering about checklists. It's just another one of the forms. Now, what you might have noticed that might be applicable to your organization is that at the moment, we don't have an FMEA worksheet available, but we will have an FMEA worksheet available. It is in development. I'm not going to give a hard timeline for when that's going to be available, but keep checking the Kenexis website to see when that will be available. We're going to have that FMEA checklist or FMEA worksheet available to you. Okay, so the PHA worksheets, the LOPA worksheets, and the checklists are where you're primarily doing your kind of team meeting work. You're going to get a team of people together. You're going to go through these worksheets. You're going to fill them out. Now, after you filled things out, there's a lot of work that happens after the PHA study is complete. So a lot of that information is going to be on these tabs of recommendations and safeguards. So you'll see here that we have a concatenated table of recommendations. Those recommendations might come from the HAZOP, they might come from the LOPA, they might come from the checklists. And when you see the recommendation, you can enter information or edit information about the recommendation itself. You could give it priorities. You can assign it to people or groups. You could track the status. You could put comments in. So just for recommendation tracking, you're also able to go back and figure out, well, where did that recommendation come from? So recommendation number 2 actually shows up in 3 different places. So I'm going to click on 3.1.2, that's going to bring me back to the study to see where that recommendation came from. So there's recommendation number 2, and you can see it in context. Okay. Also, whatever risk ranking that you have shown, we've shown before and after safeguards, it's going to show you that risk ranking information on this sheet also in that reference location piece, so you could get a feel for what you're working with. So this is going to work for the PHAs, and you could do similar things again in the LOPA worksheets and the checklist worksheets, all kind of after the PHA work. And again, our software is relational database under the hood. So even though this recommendation shows up in 3 places, it's only one recommendation. So there is a many-to-many relationship between the table of recommendations and the tables of scenarios in the different worksheets. Extremely powerful tool. The other tool is safeguards. So a lot of people are doing a lot of work after the PHA study doing something called IPL rationalization. And that's something that is very important to us at Kenexis, and it's something that we've been working with our customers to help them build out and do better and more consistently than in a lot of the other tools that are out there. So when you're done, you'll see this safeguard list. And this safeguard might show up in a lot of different locations in the Open-PHA study. So my first safeguard is the PSV 101. The type of safeguard is a PSV. We've got tag number information. And we've even got reference information so we could go back and see in context where this safeguard was discussed. So this safeguard was discussed in 2 scenarios. When I click here, it's going to ask me, well, where do you want to see it? Do I want to see it in the HAZOP or do I want to see it in the LOPA? Let me take a look at where it is in the LOPA. There it is in the layer protection analysis, so I can see it in context. And in terms of rationalization, this might be where you're making your decisions as to, is it independent? Is it auditable? Is it specific, and so on? And there you might want to view the different fields while you're doing the IPL rationalization. So I can say, okay, independent, auditable, effective. I could go back to my safeguard list, and now these things are available. So I could say, yes, the relief valve is independent. Yes, it's auditable. It's in my PM program. No, it's not effective because it's not in the right location to protect my scenario. Or maybe this relief valve was only designed for the fire case when in reality, my scenario is related to runaway reactions. So that kind of after the study rationalization of safeguards, we've built out a lot of tools to help you do that. And we're constantly in development of more and more tools to help in that rationalization process. So another part of that rationalization is I'm going to need to take data out of here and move it somewhere else. So maybe I might have a list of alarms. So let me see here. Do I have? Yes. Just out of curiosity. So let's say I needed to export all of my alarms into like an alarm management tool or into the DCS, all of my safety critical alarms. Well, in this list, I have the ability to filter it. So I want to filter by the safeguard type. I want the safeguards that contain alarm. And when I do that, I'm going to end up with a filtered list of all of the safeguards that contain the word alarm. And then I have the ability then to export this. So I can click export to Excel. And when I do that, I'm going to double click to bring up Excel. You'll see that I was able to export that list so that we can communicate it into other tools. Now, don't forget, if you want to do all this more automatically and more systematically, we have application programming interfaces to be constantly moving data back and forth, keeping everything evergreen. Okay, so those are kind of features that you will use for after the study for tracking recommendations and tracking safeguards. We have tools that allow you to import data about the MOCs when you're doing a revalidation, previous incidents, whether it's a revalidation or a new study, and even bringing in incidents that have occurred out in industry. The parking lot tool allows you to input parking lot recommendations, so something that doesn't rise to the level of being a recommendation, but you want to track. And it also allows you to view the comment fields from the PHA and the LOPA. So if you have comments that you want to track, you can see all of them in one place. Okay, so all of those tabs are working with the software itself. The next thing is the risk criteria tab is an overview level that hits how the study is structured at a much higher level, specifically in terms of risk tolerance criteria. So we have almost infinite flexibility in setting up the risk tolerance criteria in an Open-PHA study to match whatever it is that you're doing in your organization. So we have the ability to set up matrices, and we have the ability to set up matrices based on 5 different dimensions of consequence. So safety consequences, environment, asset, community, reputation. Okay. So that's the matrix. Let me come back to the matrix because the matrix is going to be built out of likelihood categories and consequence categories. So you're going to have a likelihood table that includes a short code, a longer description, and a frequency. You're going to have consequence categories that have a short code, a longer description, and target maximum event likelihood if you're using the explicit version of LOPA. Then you're going to have risk rankings, and the risk rankings are going to have codes, descriptions. You could change the color, and then you could change priorities, meaning that the higher the risk, the higher the priority. So priority 1 for us is the highest level of risk, even though it's, well, it is the highest number. So, you know, if you put A through D here, you could still rank them. Okay, so once you build things out, so right now I've got 6 consequence categories. I can add a new consequence category. So if I go in here and I add a new consequence category, I can move it up, call it consequence category 6. When I go now to my table, you'll see that that 6th column was added and all of the associated risks are left blank. So I added a new column. So now I'm going to need to say, okay, this is associated with risk category number 7, and this is risk category number 5, and so on and so forth. So that's how you change the size of the matrix, assign categories to each individual matrix intersection, add consequence categories, add likelihood categories, and delete them to whatever degree you need in order to meet your tolerable risk. Okay, everything that you've seen so far, for the most part, is available in our cloud-based tool, our enterprise software tool, which is probably an order of magnitude less expensive for an organization than our nearest, than any of our competitors, most of our competitors. But everything that you've seen so far, you could do from the free desktop version. There are other things, though, that make our software tool so powerful that only exist in the cloud-based version, and they're all in this premium tools version or premium tools section of our cloud-based software. So the premium tools allow the use of more sophisticated web-connected technologies to do more complex work tasks. And a lot of these work tasks are going to be AI enabled. Kenexis has done a lot of work with Microsoft and the Microsoft Copilots to introduce a lot of AI technologies built by Microsoft and AI technologies built by Kenexis to make your job of PSM in general a lot easier to do, and specifically with the HAZOP facilitation documentation, and also using the HAZOP information after the fact. So let's go through some of these premium tools because they are well worth the price that you will need to pay. And you know what that is because we're so proud of it. We put it on our website. The #1 most popular tool in Open-PHA is the report generator. Okay, so before I show you the report generator, let me go back to a worksheet. So if I go back to a worksheet, I can go and I can look at this worksheet. I can hit this button, there's a printer, and say export to Excel. And when I do, I'm going to go ahead and double click on that. I'm going to go to Excel and say yes. And boom, it has exported the worksheet. I'm going to try to make this a little bit bigger so that it's legible. You have the worksheet. This should be similar, very familiar. All of our competitors do something similar to this in terms of generating a report, which is great. But most of you know that you just bought yourself like a week of work after the HAZOP's over, cutting and pasting and reformatting. Well, we can do better. How can we do better? Let's do better. I can now go into my report generator. So I'm going to clear these out. When I go into my report generator, it's going to allow me to do a whole bunch of things that I couldn't do with just the export. So I can include reference locations or not. I can hide disabled items, or I can include the disabled items. Disabled items is another tool, premium tool I will come back to after I talk about our libraries a little bit more. But in the report settings, or in the report generator, it asks, well, instead of giving me one worksheet at a time, what is all of the information that you want? So let's say I want a report where I want to know what the drawings were. I want to know what the team members were. I want a list of nodes, and I want the LOPA worksheets. That's all that I want. And I want this in an 11 by 17 piece of paper that is in landscape mode. When I hit generate basic report, it's going to crunch for a few seconds. It's going to do some thinking. It's going to grab some information, and then it's going to generate this Word document, which should pop up directly. And there we go. So let me make this again viewable to the human eye. Wow. So I've got 11 by 17 sheet of paper. It gave me the drawings, the team members, the list of nodes, and the LOPA worksheets. After the LOPA worksheets, it's done. So that alone is going to save you a lot of time in generating your reports. That's worth it by itself. But that's not even the exciting part. That's basic. I mean, that's better than our competitors can do, but we could do even better than that. Let's generate a custom report. So what I'm going to do now is something a little bit more sophisticated. So let me get out of here and go back. I'm going to go back into my Finder application, and I'm going to show you something off of the Kenexis web server. So you're in the double secret inner sanctum of Kenexis. We're in the marketing and sales folders, and we're going to go to, where are my templates? Oh, there it's under products, templates. We're going to have our generic PHA report template. So this is a document that, Chris, if you can't download it off the website, you should be able to download it off the website, put an action item to remember to that. Okay, so here's our blank report that we use something similar to for Kenexis. It's got all of our fonts and our styles and our artwork and the headers and the footers. This is a blank report that you would start with. But what's interesting about this report is you're going to see these little flags. So you're going to see this little flag that says facility. And if I go all the way toward the end of the report, you're going to see this flag right here that says LOPA recommendations. So now let's do some magic. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to say, I want to generate a custom report. So choose a file. So I'm going to go and I'm going to choose that same file. So it's going to be in shared Kenexis data, marketing and sales, product, procedure template. And there is my document. That's my target. I loaded up my target and I hit generate custom report. It's going to work. It's going to work for a little while because there's a lot of work going on. This normally, if you're a PHA facilitator, might have been a week of your life that our AI powered engine just did in about, what was that, about 10 seconds? What just happened? All right, so let's go ahead and open up that file. I think this is there. All right, so what happened? I went and it basically takes all of the flags. So it found the flag that said unit. It went into the Open-PHA study and found the unit field and shoved that in. So it knows that the unit is the entire gas plant. It knows the facility owner is General Oil and Gas Operating Company. It knows that the facility is the Bayou Bay gas plant, and it grabs that information, shoves it into your template using your artwork, your fonts, your colors, everything. Takes that data, and not just one field at a time, but entire tables at a time. So you remember that there was a LOPA recommendations, so there were no LOPA recommendations, but it actually shoved the table in there with no information in it. So all of that information all at once got moved from your study. It got sucked out of your study, shoved into the Word document, and now you're done. That feature alone has got to be worth the price of admission for 90% of the people that I talk to, because I just saved you a day or a week of work for every PHA study. So the report generator, very powerful tool. Spell check. Now, most of the time you're going to get the red squiggly as you're typing. So kind of the traditional spell checking is not all it's cracked up to be, but you have the ability to take your study, send it to Microsoft's AI engine, and have it spell check the study one word at a time, words, phrases, the whole kit. So all that is available. You have the ability to do a translation. So I'm not going to do a translation right now because it is really time. Well, I'll do it. You're not going to see what the result is. So what you do is you look at your study and you say, okay, I want to translate this into my mother language, the only language I could speak before I was 5 years old, which is Polish. So what's going to happen when I hit the translate button is the software is going to take my JSON object and it's going to go one field at a time in that object. So it's going to say, okay, high pressure. It's going to send high pressure to Microsoft's AI translation engine, get a translation, bring it back, and replace that in the PHA Pro document. Now, I'm going to see, I might actually have a translate. No, I don't have a translated study. When the translation gets done, it's going to show up here. And if I remember, I'll show you the translated study. But it doesn't translate the field. So going back into the study, you'll see that I'm using this software in English. So when I go here to recommendations, all of these labels, they're called, are in English, and they're going to stay in English. And the only thing that it's translating is the guts of the study, what's actually in the fields. So that will show up in a different language. And if your browser is set to English, these fields are going to be set to English. But if you, for instance, set your browser to Chinese, or you set your browser to Portuguese, these labels are going to show up in whatever language your browser is set to do. So we have a lot of powerful translation language features that are not available in a lot of the competing software that's out there. The next item up is the revision manager. The revision manager is a very critical tool. You can access the revision manager through study data. We at Kenexis find it very important to have evergreen versions of our studies, but it's also important to have all of the historical revisions of the study all in one location where you can work with them, view them. So right now, you'll see that there are 6 revisions to the study. Technically, there are 7 revisions to the study. I'll explain that in just one second. The first revision of the study was created in January 2018. For some reason, I didn't approve it until November of 2022. But if I want to take all the information that's on all my worksheets, I'm done. I want to freeze it in time. I can simply click this button to create a new revision. I'll give it a name, a description, and remarks, hit the create button, and it will create a new revision. Once a revision's been created, so I can edit the information about this revision, including clicking a button to approve it, update the information, and so on. I can make a copy of this revision. So I could take this revision when I click the copy button. If I go back out here, you'll see that it created today here. So right here, there it is. This new revision of the study was just dumped out. So I created a copy of that old Rev 0 revision from 2018. Before I go back to the revisions, you see right here, Elektrownie gazowe HAZOP w Teksasie. So that's in Texas, for those of you who can't speak Polish. You'll see that the entire study was converted using Microsoft's AI tools from the original language. It's now been converted into Polish. Now, that's going to be the same quality as if you went to bing.microsoft.com or bing.translate.com, translate.bing.com, and did the translation. So it's not going to be perfect, but if you're having groups doing HAZOPs in their local language and you speak a different language at corporate, it's probably good enough to get the feel for what happened during the study. Okay, going back, so that was the different studies. So I could go here to Rev 1 and I can click this view button. Now you'll see the view, and what I'm looking at is I'm now viewing, I can't edit, but I can view that study as it was when Rev 1 was created. I can look at the worksheets, I can look at the checklists, I can look at the deviation. All that information is kept forever. I click this button to go back to where I started. Now, one last item on revision tracking is that when you first enter a study, you're going to see approved revision or working revision. Approved revision is going to bring me to revision number 5. So I'm viewing the data for revision number 5, which is locked because it's the last approved revision. When I uncheck that, I'm now looking at a working revision. And what this working revision is, it's going to contain all of the changes that have occurred since you did your last lock. So most of the time, you're going to want to work in your working revision. But when you first enter the software, it asks you whether you want to see the last approved version in view-only mode or if you want to go into the working revision. Okay, so all of those are the tools for tracking revisions. And this next item says previous versions, and you might be a little bit confused. Well, doesn't previous version and revision manager, aren't they the same thing? No, they're not. Previous versions are a tool for reclaiming what you did in the past And it's especially powerful with the autosave feature. So you'll see that I am autosaving once a minute, roughly, when I'm actually inside the software. And what the software does is it's going to keep the last 10 times that you saved. So if, for instance, you're in the software and you delete like an entire node accidentally and you're monkeying around and you're like, oh my God, I deleted a whole node. What do? Well, you could go back to previous revisions and say, okay, this version from 20 minutes ago, I can click the cloud download button and it will bring that version back to life. So I can bring a version back to life. I can look at it to see if it contains the information that I want. I can restore it. So basically overwrite my current working revision and restore what I had before. So there's a lot of tools to allow you to work with the autosave data to bring stuff back to life if you made a mistake. Synchronize with Vertigo. So Synchronize with Vertigo is a tool I'm going to talk a little bit about, but I'm not here today to talk about our Vertigo software, which is our SIS Safety Lifecycle tool. That's going to be a different webinar. But it's important to know that the files are linked together. So the files are independent of each other. It's not like I have one monolithic database that contains everything. Seems powerful, but generally a bad idea. So there are other web-based competitors where they keep everything in a giant database, and it ends up being a gigantic problem more than a solution. So what you want is separate data structures for different studies, but the ability to link them together. So let's say I just got done doing a PHA study, and now I want to move on. I want to take all of my safety instrumented functions out of that PHA study and carry them over to the next step in the safety life cycle. I can click the Synchronize with Vertigo button, and it's going to bring me here. Or if I'm simply in the safeguard list, I can also click this button here and bring up that same field. So it's going to ask me whether I want to create a new study or update an existing study. So you can update an existing study that you've done links to or create a new one. I'm just going to create a new one. I'm going to call it a new study. And then you could say, well, what do you want to carry over? So I want to carry over everything that I called a SIF. When I click the Synchronize button, you get the message saying that the work is done. So now if I go back out of here and I've created this new Vertigo study right here, when I click on it, you're going to see that all of the safety functions that were in my Open-PHA study have now been put into a Vertigo study, and all of the information that's contained in the Open-PHA study has been carried over. So tag numbers, IPF descriptions, risk reduction factors, all of that has been carried over into the study, and now I can start my work. Furthermore, you could keep track of all these linkages forevermore. So I know, for instance, that this item right here was created in Open-PHA. It's linked. So now that I'm in Vertigo, my SIS design basis tool, I could click this button to go back to Open-PHA and see where it came from. Okay, so there's where it came from. And I can also, for this button, I can synchronize. So if I've been working with these two studies for years, I can see what the data is in Open-PHA versus what the data is in Vertigo. And if the data was different between the two studies, I can synchronize them to make them match each other. Or technically, you can push data from Open-PHA into Vertigo, but you can't go the other direction. Quiz question, 10 points for anybody who can answer why you wouldn't want to do that. The answer is your PHA is a legal document. If you want to make a change to your PHA, you need a full PHA team to review and approve what you're doing. So I don't want my SIS tool to make changes to what happened in my PHA because I would quite literally be breaking the law. So that's how you do that. And I can even go over here and I can break the link. So now those two things have been detached from each other. If I wanted to hook things back together, I could go back into that Texas City gas plant study. And let's link it to let's link it to this safeguard because I just want to entertain myself. So now I linked to this safeguard in the Polish study. Just going nuts. I love this tool. Sometimes I love to just get in here and play around. Okay, so that's the feature of the software. And I meant not to open this, but to open this. Moving on with premium tools, we have the ability to import from a library. I already showed you the ability to import nodes. I can show you the ability to import a checklist. So in the Kenexis standard library, there is a checklist called Chemical Process Initial Design, which is a checklist found in the Fundamentals of Chemical Process Safety book written by Crowell and Luvar. Let's say I want to input this checklist. If I hit import checklist, boom, and you'll see that doing demos, I've already imported it 3 times now. But that checklist gets imported out of the library and it's ready for you to come do work on. So you have the ability to import entire nodes, import checklists, and also import settings. And what do we mean by settings? So if you import settings, it's going to import all of this risk tolerance criteria. And it's also going to import all of this column setting visibility data. So those two things combined are the settings that if you don't want to start with a template document that contains everything, you could just import the settings. The last item that I'm going to talk about, well, whatever you can import, you can also export. So you can export the entire study into a library, nodes, checklists, risk criteria, and so on. Okay. This last or second to last item, library sync, involves a little bit more discussion because we've created fairly recently, in the past 3 to 6 months, a lot of powerful tools for interactions with HAZOP studies and LOPA studies. So if you're doing a LOPA study, you might be in the LOPA study and say, okay, I have another, let me scroll down. Let me go somewhere else. No, let me not go somewhere else. Stay on page. Let me stick here and just go down to 1.6. So for 1.6, I've got a relief valve here and low level shutdown. Here, all I have is a safety instrumented function. So let's say for this scenario, I wanted to add a new safeguard that is a relief valve. Well, I can add here and I could say, okay, give me a relief valve. Its type is going to be PSV. And its PFD is 0.0057. Okay, so some of you might be cringing saying, well, that number is too low, and 0.57, where'd you get that precision from? This is stupid. You should be using 0.01 there. Well, you know, we always have the ability to add things in a custom way. But what if, and let me go ahead and delete this. I'm going to delete this selected item. It's not used in any more scenarios, so I'm going to delete it entirely from my database. So what I could do instead is for this IPL, I can click on this button And when I click this button, it's going to import the safeguard from the library. So when I click here, I can say, okay, show me the Kenexis standard library of safeguards. It's going to bring me this list. And I'm going to say, show me, insert for me out of the library, a pressure safety valve, one fully sized valve. So these numbers should be familiar to you. They're similar to what you'll see out of the CCPS Blue Book for IPLs and initiating events. So when I click this, I'm going to say, okay, import it as new, which means don't replace the data on my row, create a new row for me. And when I do that, you'll see it created a new row and it contained information about the PSV and all the information out of the library. So first off, before I go further, let me show you where the libraries are. So if I go back, I'm going to stay on page and save it. Then I'm going to go back. So if I go back out into the project manager, you'll see that there's a library section where I can view the library. So you can create your own company library. You can create your own personal custom library, or you might have access to the you will have access to the Kenexis standard library. So if I go into the Kenexis standard library, and we are still in the process of fleshing this out, I can go into Open-PHA, I could go into safeguards, and it's going to bring me this table. I can add new safeguards into this table, enter in all information that is relevant about that safeguard, and it will keep track of it forevermore. So that's where you can use Kenexis's library, or you can add your own library information in. Okay, going back into the study. Now that I'm working with the study, you'll see that I inserted that information into this IPL. But let's say someone came along and said, no, I don't want to take that much. Well, actually, let me not do that yet. I go here and there's this functionality called library sync. What the library sync is going to do is you choose what you want to look at. I want to look at safeguards. And what it's going to do is it's going to scan my entire study to say, what safeguards do you have that you brought out of the library? So out of 132 safeguards, only 6 of them came out of the library. So you can very quickly see whether the library is used in the study or not. And then it's also going to check to see whether the information is still consistent with what's in the library. So you'll see that for these 2 items, the information I pulled out of the library is consistent, but for this captive key interlock and this check valve, you'll see that somebody changed the information in the study and now it's no longer consistent with the library. That's okay, because when you go here to reference locations, neither of those 2 items are contained in the study anymore. So you should probably go delete them in the first place. And here you also have the ability to see where that's being used. So if I click here, I can go to LOPA Worksheets and it will show me where this information exists. So this kind of library functionality, hands down, is going to be more powerful than any of our competitors, and it's going to allow PHA facilitators and, more importantly, corporate staff at operating companies to look at the work that's being done at individual sites and by third-party contractors to get a quality check to make sure that things are being done the right way. It is going to definitely speed up that stage 1 functional safety assessment to make sure that you're following your policies and procedures for how you're doing your risk analysis studies. So that's the library sync. The last item is a tool that it's here, but it's something that's kind of on the obsolete side, and it's the Bowtie Diagram. So what we allow in our tool is Bowtie Diagram visualization. So if I click on this consequence, I click on this scenario in a LOPA study, I can click on Bowtie Diagram, And boom, lo and behold, it is going to draw that LOPA scenario as a bow tie diagram. It's going to take the two causes. It's going to take the safeguards that are associated with those causes that are preventive. They show up on the left-hand side. If you have conditional modifiers, they modify the consequence, not the cause. So they're going to show up on the right-hand side, and you can have a variety of different consequence categories that are available that you're going to be able to view. So this tool is kind of a quick and dirty tool to view LOPA scenarios, but some people, they will find it very helpful. You can show this during your PHA study to allow people to get a better feel. You can download it and insert it into reports. But I don't want to say that the tool is obsolete. It's very valuable. It's very important. But most of the time, if you're doing bow ties, you're going to want to do a little bit more heavy lifting. So what we are going to recommend, if you need to do more complex, rigorous bow tie diagram analysis, is to go into our bow tie tool. So export out of Open-PHA, and then you can open into our bow tie tool, where you have the ability to look at a wide variety of bow tie diagrams directly in our tool. The way our tool works is, if all you want to do is draw a pretty picture, you're going to do the same thing as all of our competitors do. But if you want to do a little bit more heavy lifting, all the information from the bow tie was brought in. So you can look at tags, you can assign frequencies, you can look at safeguard types, probability of failure on demand, the consequences, the multiple consequences are going to have the full risk ranking associated with them, target maximum event likelihood targets. And you're even going to be able to view whether or not you achieve tolerable risk for your LOPA scenarios for multiple different consequences. So there's a group of people that are actually leaving the Open-PHA software for their LOPAs in order to do their LOPAs in the bow tie diagram software, because it's so much more visually appealing. And bow tie diagrams are something more and more regulators are requiring as a mechanism to display the barriers, the causes, the consequences for major hazard scenario. And of course, everything in the Kenexis integrated safety suite is linked together. So if you do your work in Open-PHA, it's not lost. You're going to click a couple buttons. You're going to go ahead and export out and be able to see that information as a bow tie diagram. So with that, that is our software. Well, that's our Open-PHA software. I just opened up Vertigo, which is going to be the subject of an entirely different webinar. But at this point in time, that is Open-PHA. And a last reminder, if you want more information, go to our website, www.kenexis.com, click on software, go to PHA HAZOP LOPA software. You're going to get all the information. You can download brochures. You can download the free, always has been free, always will be free desktop version of our software. You can request a trial for the cloud-based version, and you can look at our current pricing as of today, May 17th, 2024. And you can also request for proposal. So with that, I thank you for all of your time in attending this webinar. If you have any questions that didn't get answered, please feel free to send me an email directly, edward.marzell@kenexis.com, or you can send an email to info@kenexis.com, and that goes to our sales and marketing staff. You could go to support@kenexis.com, which goes to our tech support staff.